Okay, hello everybody. Welcome, Fran. Thank you so much for being here with us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin. I am the marketing coordinator at Brightly Thrive, doing the workplace well-being program. So, as part of that, we offer a quarterly series, a special guest expert series. And today we're so excited to have our special guest expert, Fran Dargaville. And this month, as you know, if you've been following along in our Thrive Together Slack channel, the theme of the month has been Love Your Gut. So we've been talking about gut health, aligned with just self-love and really taking care of your body, nourishing from the inside out. So welcome, Fran. We're so excited to have you and hear more about gut health today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here and have this conversation with all of you in hopefully a very interactive way as well.
Yeah, and before we get started, we'd love to know a little more about you. So I know that you're a functional nutritionist and you have a master's degree in human nutrition, specializing in gut health. Fran is passionate about empowering individuals to take control of their health through real food nutrition, lifestyle adjustments, and evidence-based functional practices. Fran believes that symptoms like bloating, fatigue, and digestive discomfort are signals from the body that something is out of balance. With a root cause approach, she acts as a health detective, uncovering the underlying issues behind gut and hormone imbalances. Her goal is to help clients, especially those dealing with IBS and other gut related health conditions, find sustainable solutions so they can stop stressing about their health and get back to living a life they love. And so before we dive in, Fran, we have some icebreakers for you. So, guilty pleasure, what is your go-to comfort food or activity for self-care?
Oh my gosh. There are plenty, but I love a good lasagna if we're talking meals, like a homemade lasagna that is like so delicious for me. And I also love my chocolate as well.
Oh, I love that so much. Wonderful. Um, what about a daily wellness ritual that sets a positive tone for your day?
Yeah, so I have something that has been consistent now for a very long time, and it's very simple, and that's just getting out for a coffee with my husband and my dog every single morning. It just gets us outside. We go for a little walk. It's nothing crazy, a 20-minute walk, get our coffee, spend that time together. And it's just a nice, it's kind of a slow start to the morning. It's nothing crazy, but it's doing something together. And, we get that sunshine in our eyes, which is great for your circadian rhythm. We get to spend that time together and a little bit of movement as well, which I absolutely love.
I love that so much. And you're in Australia, which is so fun.
Yes, yes, I am.
Um, we would love to know for travel therapy if you have a memorable travel experience that left a lasting impact on your well-being.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've done a lot of travel and thinking of this, I'm like, I think there's a lot of travel experiences that left negative impacts on my well-being in terms of things like parasites that I picked up along the way. So that's obviously not ideal. But I think travel always, for me, definitely as an Australian, one of my favorite places to go is Bali. And that sounds so stereotypical, but I think it's like just incredible healthy food, just living a very, outdoor lifestyle in that warm, humid, tropical kind of climate. That's always just, reminds me of health and wellness, I suppose. I've just booked another trip this year. So yeah, I think that just brings me back to that every time, spending as much time as possible in the water, in the sunshine without doing it, of course, and like eating all of the amazing healthy food.
That sounds so amazing. And when you said like travel and parasites, I was like, oh yes, gut health. Yes, maybe we can talk about point travel health. A lot of us have
Yeah, yeah.
we picked up some things along the way. So
Definitely. Very common.
before we dive in, is there anything else you would like to add about yourself, your bio, who you are? Share a little bit about maybe your story, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, I think it's quite common for people in the health space to have their own health experiences. That's why a lot of us get into this work. So for me, it was the main thing I was dealing with was chronic fatigue syndrome. So I had it for the first time as a teenager, did a couple of things, and it kind of miraculously improved at that time. I'd been sleeping, 14 plus hours a night, still feeling exhausted, made a few dietary changes at the time, saw a very forward thinking osteopath at the time who really, pointed me in the right direction. And then it happened all over again in my early 20s, and the same things weren't quite moving the needle. And that's literally why I decided to study nutrition in the first place. That sort of led me down that path. And it was really, my own sort of selfish motivations from the start to get myself to a good place. And that's what I was able to do through that process. And then that was a huge motivation for me to share that with other people. I think the whole health and nutrition space was very different back then, 12, 13 years ago. There wasn't as much information and it wasn't as easy to digest. And I think that's not the worst thing, right? I think it's information overload and confusion now. But really, that was my motivation to be able to help others do the same. And also, I have a podcast and I share on my Instagram and things like that, all about simplifying health and gut health for people. And also, a lot of my message is really, supporting your health, but not getting too caught up in all the overwhelm and confusion and noise that is out there online, because I think that so often just adds to the stress and overwhelm, and it's not really serving us. So that's a big part of, my why and what I want to share with people, today and every single day as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of information, a lot of conflicting information, a lot of noise. It can be like very overwhelming. So we're really glad to have you here and especially talking about gut health since that's so primary to everything.
100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So we can dive in now if you're ready for our questions. So the first one is, what are some common signs of an unhealthy gut?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most obvious signs and symptoms of an unhealthy gut would be the digestive symptoms, whether that is, bloating, gas, burping, constipation, loose stools, all of those kind of things, of course, can point to an unhealthy gut. But beyond that, there is so much more, really any symptom that we can experience can be linked, either directly or indirectly to gut health, because our gut health is so foundational to our overall health. So that can include, low energy levels, poor sleep quality, brain fog, chronic inflammation, autoimmunity, difficulties losing weight, and sort of metabolic issues. So really any of these, signs, symptoms, and conditions, as I said, either indirectly or directly, can be, often connected to gut health in some way, hormone related, imbalances and conditions as well. So I like to sort of picture a tree. You might have seen this analogy used, in this way with health before. And at the top of the tree, we have all of these, individual leaves, which is our symptoms. So that could include, any of the things I've mentioned. So it could be bloating, low energy, even autoimmunity, for example, whatever it is that is, unique to you, any of these things that you're experiencing at the top of the tree. And we so often just look at these things, individually and think about, how can I fix the low energy? I go take maybe it's the iron pills or whatever it is, or just the B vitamins. Same with the bloating, what can I take? These de-bloat capsules, for example. We're looking at all of these things in isolation. But when we look down at the bottom of the tree at the roots, these are those driving factors that are what is actually, leading to the development of those symptoms at the top of the tree. And gut health and digestive function is a really core critical thing that we need to look at for so many of these different symptoms and conditions. And beyond that, there are other things, like chronic stress, for example, environmental toxins. There's so many different contributing factors that are at the root cause of those symptoms. But gut health is a key one. So, whatever it is you're dealing with, you want to be looking at and considering your gut health because it is so fundamental and important, for the health of your whole body.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I remember when I first started because I had so many health issues back in the day. And, you go to all these different symptoms, and then you're like, oh, the root of so much of it is stress and all these things, but also the gut. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we have some questions coming in. We will probably get to that in just a bit if that sounds good. But yeah, please keep your questions coming. You can pop them in the chat, or at the end, we can definitely ask Fran as well. So, when it comes to the connection between gut health and our immune system, can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a large portion of our immune system resides within the gut, in a number of different ways. So, we have our gut microbiome, which is very, very important to our immune system. And, our gut as well is really our first line of defense in terms of, what we consume, we're exposed to potentially, as I mentioned before, things like parasites, viruses, bacteria. It's kind of the inside of our body meets the external world, which sounds a little bit weird because it is internal, but we ingest things and they go through our digestive tract. So it's a bit of a two-way street when it comes to the connection between our gut and our immune system. But because there's such a strong connection there, what is going on with our immune system can really impact our gut, and then what is going on with our gut and the state of our gut. If you're dealing with an imbalanced microbiome, if you have, things like parasites, bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, things like that, or just impaired digestive function, that's going to in turn impact your immune system, which can lead to chronic inflammation, and then chronic inflammation can lead to a whole host of health conditions, including, or symptoms as well, including some of the things that I mentioned before. So there's a very strong connection there, which means that if you want a healthy and robust immune system, you really want to look at and support your gut health. But at the same time, sometimes you need to support your immune system in a more direct way as well. For example, checking things like, your vitamin D status, and, certain things like, direct supplementation. Obviously, case by case basis, things like, zinc and vitamin C and these kind of things can be supportive in a more direct way as well. But, they are very interconnected, and the gut is just really crucial when it comes to our immune health, essentially.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that because I think sometimes we don't know that. And our immune system is so much, they say 70 to 80% really rooted.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's just incredible. Um, so we had a question come in about foods, and I'm going to jump on that. But which foods and, well, what dietary patterns would you say or specific foods best support optimal gut health? And then one of the questions that came in is what type of foods can lead to feeling sluggish and tired during the day? So kind of the flip side of that.
Mm. Yeah, perfect. So, as I said earlier, I like to block out a lot of the noise online. And I think a really good way to do that when it comes to nutrition is by focusing on whole foods, as close to their natural state as possible. And this doesn't have to be 100% of what you eat by any means. I think, kind of an 80-20 approach is great. But instead of getting caught up in the different diets, because, we see there are people saying you need to go carnivore for your diet, you need to go vegan for your diet. There's all these different dietary approaches and ways of doing things, a lot of them very extreme, and a lot of them that are not going to be right for a lot of people. So if we just, get rid of all the diets and just focus on whole foods, so, real unprocessed foods, things like, meat, the best quality that you're able to get, seafood, again, the best that you're able to get, eggs, fruits, veggies, nuts and seeds, as long as you're able to break those things down. Really just eating the rainbow and getting a really good diversity of all of these, colors, fibers, and animal-based foods as well, if that's something that you consume, as much as possible. So it's all about, the whole foods and that variety. And like I said, that sort of 80-20 approach and not getting too caught up in the diet trends. So in terms of what supports our gut health when it comes to food, there are a couple of, simple sort of principles that I like to focus on. So obviously the whole foods, that 80-20 approach. First thing is protein. So everyone's banging on about protein lately, but I've been banging on about it for a very long time because it's something that's incredibly important and something that I find a lot of us don't get enough. And we need adequate protein for lots of different roles within the body. But one of the sort of core things is stabilizing our blood sugar levels. And that essentially signals safety to the body, and that feeling of safety is very important for our gut health. When our blood sugar is all over the place, that puts us in a state of stress, even if you're eating, healthy salads, smoothies, things like that. And that state of stress impacts our digestive function, how we're able to break down foods, and can then, over time impact the balance of bacteria within your gut. So protein is important. The amount you need is a little bit different, but I, like to look at each meal. Ideally, we want around 25 to 30 grams of protein. Maybe, it's slightly lower with breakfast. Maybe it's a little higher. You can sort of balance them out throughout the day, but prioritizing that protein with each meal. Another gut specific thing when it comes to protein is, we want adequate protein to also support the repair of our gut lining. It's also, it's got an important role in the immune system as well. So protein is important. Seems unrelated to gut health, but it is very much related and something that we want to, look at and prioritize. As I mentioned, whole foods. So there are more specific things that we can look at in terms of, just getting enough fiber. So around sort of 25 grams of fiber, at a minimum each day. However, that being said, if you have a lot of digestive issues right now, you're dealing with a lot of the bloating, gas, digestive discomfort, you probably want to sort that out first, and you're going to want to very slowly and gradually increase your fiber intake as your tolerance to those foods increases. So you don't want to go from 0 to 100 here, because it'll often just make you feel worse. And that's why we see a lot of people with the carnivore diet. So I don't know if anyone's been seeing people talking about the carnivore diet online. A lot of people are feeling better with that because they're not able to digest these fibrous foods, fruit, veggies, things like that very well. And especially the more fermentable carbohydrates, garlic, onion, things like that. A lot of people feel better when they don't have them. But if you can work on your gut over time, improve that digestive function and that sort of robustness of your gut, you can increase your tolerance to those foods. And we know that these foods, are very important for supporting the balance of our gut microbiome, essentially. We've got there's evidence that shows that people who are, consuming 30 or more plant foods a week have a much healthier sort of microbiome profile compared to people who have 10 a week. So checking in with these things, not making any drastic changes because it might make you feel worse, but keeping in mind that that's what you want to sort of work towards. And those things are sort of foundational, and they're a really good starting point for most people. But then there are kind of like the more bonus advanced steps, looking at things like prebiotics, which essentially feed the beneficial bacteria within our gut. And that includes things like garlic and onion. There's also sort of more supplement based, prebiotic fibers like PHGG, for example. And then probiotics as well. Everyone knows about probiotic supplements, but particularly fermented foods, kefir, some people say that kefir, kefir, however you want to say that, any sort of fermented veggies, sauerkraut, things like that. So they're sort of the core things that I'd be looking at. food wise in terms of adding in. And then also we want to look at what we want to, scale it back on. So things like ultra processed foods, again, 80/20 approach here. You don't have to never touch these things unless you have a specific reason, like celiac disease, for example. Refined sugar, alcohol, again, it's not an all or nothing thing, but just being mindful that if you're having these things in large quantities consistently, they will be impacting your gut microbiome. So I know that was a lot, but that's kind of the overarching thing. And to keep it simple, it's the whole foods, really, that protein bonus for your probiotics and prebiotics, and then maybe looking at a couple of those things that you want to maybe scale it back on.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm so glad you touched on the fiber piece. I was actually going to ask you about that because I feel like we get so much, conditioning and messages around fiber, fiber, fiber. But I know from my experience and many of the clients I've worked with, when it comes to gut health, if your gut is compromised, like it's so hard sometimes to introduce that fiber and do smoothies and do the raw veggies. And when I was first working on my gut, it was like killing me to do that. But I was getting all this conflicting messaging. So I love how you said you kind of have to build up your gut strength, and protein is so important too.
Definitely. And I think it is confusing because everyone has their own priorities. Like, there's huge doctors and nutritionists in the health space essentially saying, yes, a vegan, high plant-based diet, like this is the thing that's going to fix your gut issues. And for some people, eating an ultra processed diet, that might do it for you. But for a lot of people, as you said, it's just going to make things worse, at least in the short term, for sure.
Yeah, I remember going vegan and it almost killed me. I was like, okay, maybe not for me. So that brings me to the bio individual piece. Can you talk about that? Because I know some people do better on a paleo kind of diet. Some people do better on more of, high protein. So how do we know what is kind of best for our bodies? And how do you kind of feel into that when it comes to rebuilding the gut, healing the gut, and kind of feeling into what feels best for you?
Yeah, so there are different ways to do that. I think the best, and it's easy in a way, it's simple maybe, but not necessarily easy, is just listening to your own body and getting familiar with, I guess, how your body feels day to day and starting to basically get in touch with how you respond to different things. So in the short to medium term, doing a food, mood sort of symptom journal, you can find these things online, templates, things like that. You can use a spreadsheet if you're that way inclined, just to keep track of different things and basically just see yourself as an experiment and try different things and see what works, because we're all a little bit different. And I can say, based on this is likely to work for you. And obviously I've worked with thousands of people, so I know the patterns and what works for most people, but it's not really true 100% of the time. And you're the only one in your own body that can assess that for yourself and how you feel and respond to different foods and, different supplements and different, bedtimes and things like that. So I think keeping track of that, or at least just paying attention every day, because a lot of us we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're rushing about. We're not sort of, tuning in and paying attention. Just pay attention, a couple of times. Maybe it's just at meal times. Okay, I'm sitting down, I'm having breakfast. How am I feeling right now? How do I feel after? Do I feel bloated and uncomfortable? Just checking in throughout the day, maybe taking a little note of it while you're sort of practicing this so that you can remember. I think that's extremely valuable and helpful. And even if you then go on to do, more advanced things, maybe you go and do some blood testing, or even things like, gut microbiome testing, things like that. That data is very helpful and valuable, but we still want to know how you feel and how you respond. That's still very important and valuable information. We don't just override that because of, what a blood test says, for example. So there is that, more sort of advanced option, but it's very important to just check in with yourself and also just be a little bit honest with yourself, because I think a lot of people will say, just as an example, oh no, gluten's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. And then in reality, they're super constipated, they've got terrible skin, their sleep's awful, they're bloated all the time. So, sometimes we need to sort of inquire and be honest with ourselves and see ourselves as a bit of an experiment. It might be like, cool, I'm just going to take a break from that for a couple of weeks and see how I respond. Or I'm going to, really double down on my protein intake for a few days and see if that improves my sleep, for example. So just seeing it all as a big experiment, not taking it too seriously, and just having a little bit of fun with it as well to find what works for you.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So one of the questions was, are there vitamins to help boost natural energy? And then also, what supplements would you recommend for optimal gut health?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the energy side of things, I'm glad we're coming back to that. I'm going to bring up one of the things, like I said, that I bang on about all the time, and that is protein, because again, we're looking for these pick me ups. But the energy side of things, it's often due to imbalanced blood sugar, um, which also then goes on to impact our sleep quality. And those two things are often huge drivers for low energy. So I would be looking at those things first. Also, I would be looking at sleep quality as well, because this is something I'm seeing a lot and something that I'm having a lot of conversations with clients about that you would not expect if you were coming to a gut health nutritionist. But things like sleep disordered breathing, are you breathing through your nose? Are you breathing through your mouth? Do you, clench your jaw, grind your jaw? Do you have, maybe like mild sleep apnea and things like this? Because if you have a lot of these things going on, you may be constantly in that, wired state and not getting that proper sleep quality. So I would be, asking yourself, yeah, do you clench your jaw, grind your jaw? Do you snore? Do you wake up with a dry mouth, scalloped tongue, things like that? And then looking into that, there's some, great books and things like that. I think it's the 8 Hour Sleep Paradox or something along those lines. That's a great book on that. Um, things like nasal strips, the mouth taping, as long as that's, appropriate for you and you can breathe through your nose. Some of these things are an absolute game changer, and they're what we want to be the first port of call, because they're going to get you to where you want to go in the long term. More, I guess, quick fix kind of supplements, but that can be important and appropriate. Well, actually, not so much. I think the B vitamins, in terms of supplementation, you don't want to load up on these things. There's been more and more coming out about, excess B6, for example, causing issues for people. So be mindful, don't overload these kind of supplements, but getting a really good quality multivitamin complex, for example, from a reputable brand that has B vitamins, not in crazy amounts, is a good thing. And of course, you can always check in with your doctor and practitioner about whether these things are appropriate for you. And if you have any sort of health condition, you definitely want to get advice around that. The other thing as well is, iron as well. This is something that is very common. A lot of people are aware of that, and that can often be the first port of call. People are like, oh, I'm tired, I'm just going to go get some iron tablets or something like that. With that, we want to be careful with iron. Too much iron, overloading the iron, can be inflammatory. So that's really one of those areas that we want to test and not guess. So that's something to look into. But a more, gentle, supportive way that you can go about that is just, eating red meat. If you eat meat, good quality meat, or the best quality that you're able to access and afford. And it's different from person to person, and that's why I like having the information of a blood panel for this. But I find a lot of cycling women, they might need red meat, say like 3 to 5 times a week, for example. And it may be different for other people. Like other people, maybe it's more like 2 to 3 times a week to maintain those sort of iron stores. So that's that bio individuality, and where having the data can help. But if you are just consuming red meat in that way, you're less likely to overdo it. You can still overdo it with the iron, but you're less likely to be able to. And there are also, liver capsules, organ capsules, and powders and things like that, which are going to be a more gentle, well-tolerated way to add in a little bit extra iron, B vitamins, some minerals and things like that, without having just a straight up iron supplement that you don't know whether or not you need, essentially. So there was that side of things. And I feel like there was a part two question that I've completely forgotten.
Um, maybe someone can
Someone
remind.
else might remember.
I think you touched on it. You were talking about the boosting natural energy. Um, yeah, they were talking about vitamins for that. So I think that's wonderful. And yeah, we
Yeah,
were just talking
perfect.
about general supplements that were most beneficial for maintaining a healthy gut.
Yeah, I can. I have sort of touched on a little bit of that, but I could do that more. So I mentioned, with the prebiotics, for example, like PHGG, that's a very sort of safe, effective, well-researched supplement that is, pretty accessible and a good thing for a lot of people to add in. Even with something like, this is just a fiber supplement, but it's a really good one. It's got a lot of benefits. But even with something as safe as that, you still want to be mindful if you're taking medication, for example, because fiber absorbs stuff. You're probably going to want to separate that by a few hours. So these things, even with natural stuff, we want to be mindful of this kind of thing. So PHGG is a really great all-rounder for gut health. It has a balancing effect. So if you have, constipation, it can help regulate that. If you have, the opposite end of the spectrum, it can help regulate that. As I mentioned with fiber, low and slow always. So start with a really small amount, quarter of a teaspoon either, even, and then just very gradually increase to the recommended amount. If you add it all straight in, same as with bumping up all the plant foods, you're probably not going to feel great. There's that side of things. Probiotic supplements, I know everyone always wants to know about this. Um, I think it's interesting when we look at gut microbiome testing, for example, that often people will go and grab your standard lactobacillus bifidobacterium, standard probiotic, and then we look at their gut microbiome test, and maybe they don't need either of those things, or maybe they even just have more beneficial bacteria than they need, and they've got different issues going on, like an overgrowth of certain pathogens and things like that. So when it comes to probiotics, maybe it can be helpful. And, we've spoken about travel, things like there's Saccharomyces boulardii, for example, which you can take before traveling. You could take them here and there if you've had antibiotics and you feel you need. But generally, I like to focus on food. Most of the time, you don't need to be spending a lot of money on probiotics, for example. And prebiotics are feeding that beneficial bacteria. So that's, a great, generally more affordable thing to add in. There's so much beyond that, things like digestive enzymes, for example, but it really comes down to the individual. And same as with the probiotics, you might not need digestive enzymes. They might help you, they might not be beneficial. And that's where I guess getting an understanding of what you actually need, if you've got more chronic, symptoms going on, is going to be helpful. So you're not just throwing away your money on like random supplements that aren't actually right for you, I guess.
Oops, gotcha. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, am I muted? No, okay. So one question that came through is what foods are good to eat if a person cannot have dairy, like milk, cheese, and butter, but they may need more calcium in their diet?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So with the calcium side of things, yeah, often people's doctors will still, encourage them to have dairy products, but obviously if it doesn't work for you, then not a great option. Um, so like tinned salmon, for example, things like any small fish that still have the bones in. I know that's not for everyone, so that's the best way to get calcium in. So any either tinned salmon with the bones that they're very soft, so you can either just eat it as is, make things like salmon patties, for example, or any of the small fish where you're eating the bones. I know, yeah, like I said, for some people that's just a no-go, so I definitely get that. This is, dark leafy greens, certain seeds as well, which I've had a mental blank on which ones those are, but that's definitely something that you can easily find online. But yeah, I would say if you can do the small fish or the tinned salmon, that's definitely going to be the most effective. If you're focusing on the other things, you're probably going to need to get quite a lot. But when it comes to, calcium, I think everyone's very focused on calcium and it is important, but it is one picture of the puzzle. We need everyone, yeah, like I said, calcium's a big thing that people like to focus on, but we need, other specific vitamins for healthy bones, and we need a balance of all of our minerals as well. That's when something like a, good quality multivitamin that includes just small amounts of these things can be beneficial in addition to diet, or also like multi-mineral supplements where you're not just loading up on calcium, one mineral, you're getting kind of the optimal balance of these different things. So there's specific supplements that you can look into around that. And of course, you can get personalized guidance if you need, but yeah, that's just something to consider, those different options for you.
Wonderful, thank you. What about, can drinking too much water affect your digestion, electrolyte balance, or nutrient absorption? Um, Someone wrote that they drink more than is probably healthy.
Yeah. So yes, that's definitely the case. And so nutrient absorption maybe, but digestion and electrolyte balance, yes, definitely. So we want to have sort of the right balance or amount of water for each of us, to be healthy. And that is going to vary from person to person. If you're doing a lot of exercise, sweaty exercise, hot yoga, a lot of, saunas and things like that, then you're going to need a little bit more. And also, you're probably going to benefit from adding in some electrolytes as well. I believe the amount of water, if I tell you, roughly 2 liters, that might mean absolutely nothing for you. So someone might be able to convert that into, an amount that's familiar for you. But around that sort of, yeah, 2 liter mark, again, that might need conversion, is going to be sort of a baseline. And some people, great, thank you, Hannah. Some people are going to, get away with a little bit less if you're not particularly active or you're smaller. And also, if you're having lots of herbal teas and things like that, that can definitely contribute to that. And like I said, if you're doing lots of, sweaty exercise, things like that, you may need a little more, but definitely not, double that. That's going to be excessive. So yeah, I would be looking at, depending on where that is at, potentially scaling that back. I find when people are drinking a lot of water, it's because they're not actually kind of getting satiated from that water. So adding in those electrolytes on a consistent basis, you don't need to have them each and every day. I think, with brands like Element and stuff like that, hopefully it's okay to be mentioning brands. I think it's marketed as you need to have this electrolyte every single day, add it to your water bottle, carry it around with you, drink it all the time. A few days a week is fine, but adding in some electrolytes will help you, get that sort of satiety, I suppose, so you're not like constantly thirsty. Also, things like, coconut water, a little pinch of salt, for example, to your water, it can be good as well. But yeah, we don't want to overdo it because of the electrolyte balance. Also, having lots of water around meals as well. When it's excessive, sipping on a glass of water with a meal, absolutely fine. But chugging, water with meals can be diluting your digestive juices and then impact your digestion because you don't have that proper sort of concentration or balance between the digestive juices, the enzymes, stomach acid, and all of that, and the food. So yeah, definitely look at that and, try the electrolytes if you haven't already. Like I said, doesn't need to be every day. And yeah, it can be hard to kind of change habits like that when you're used to drinking that amount. But if you find that you're properly hydrated from the electrolytes, coconut water, things like that, then hopefully that will be a little bit easier for you.
Thank you. Those are such good tips. Yeah. Okay, what about gut microbiome tests? Are they worth it? And what insights can they provide about our health? I know there's a lot of information around the gut tests.
Yeah, definitely. So this is another one of those trends and things that a lot of people are talking about, but I think this is actually a really good thing. So some of you might have seen, or maybe all of you, the Netflix documentary recently that Hack Your Health. They did some gut microbiome testing as well, which is really cool to see, in a mainstream kind of documentary. So firstly, I guess, what is a gut microbiome test? It's a stool test, so it's a poop test basically. And it's giving us lots of information about what's going on in your gut. So do you have enough beneficial bacteria? Do you have, an overgrowth of whether it's potentially harmful bacteria, parasites, fungal overgrowth, things like that. Also, how your digestive system is functioning as well. Like, are you making enough digestive enzymes to break down your food and things like that? So, very helpful in terms of the information it provides. I think as to whether it's sort of, worth it, I think it really depends on you and where you're at. I have come across a lot of people who are at the very beginning of their health journey and they want to do the microbiome testing. In which case I would say, the few $100s it costs, you're probably much better off, spending that money on just good quality food, or even, making that meal prep easier for you in some way, getting even some pre-prepared meals and things like that. And those things and those foundational pieces like the sleep, the stress, things like that, the nutrition foundational pieces that we've spoken about, they're always going to be the bigger sort of priority. So it's not really the first port of call or starting point. Some people are just data driven and they just want that, in which case that's absolutely fine. That's all right. If you're happy to spend the money and you want that information, that's great. But I think where it's particularly helpful is when you have more chronic, long lasting, symptoms or health conditions or anything like that that can be sort of tied back or connected to gut health, whether it is, an autoimmune condition or just like chronic IBS, for example, some of those digestive symptoms we mentioned before, or any of these kind of things, then it's really valuable to get an understanding of what's going on in your gut so that you can then really target and personalize your nutrition, because there are different nutritional approaches based on what's going on. Also different supplement recommendations. Like I mentioned, some people are going to have very low levels of beneficial bacteria, and we need to look at the probiotics and prebiotics and things like that. Some people are going to have, insufficient levels of digestive enzymes, and that's when, digestive enzyme supplementation is going to be helpful for that person. So it really helps us sort of prioritize and get some answers when you are dealing with, more chronic symptoms and conditions. So definitely valuable and something to consider for anyone who's been on this sort of journey for a while and is after some answers, basically.
Wow, thank you for all of that. That was such good info. Yeah, I know there's just a lot of conflicting messaging out there about testing, and sometimes I've done testing too with the gut health stool test, and they come back inaccurate at times. So thank you for that perspective on that. Yeah. Um, so one thing we keep touching on, which I think is important, is parasites. What is your perspective on parasites? I know we all have them. I know it can be a root cause of so many gut health issues that we may not know about. Can you touch on that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how many, we just have this conversation and how many like trends and things like that pop up. I think feel like
Yeah.
Candida was like a 90s,
Yes.
2000s thing. And like the last few years, it's all about the parasites. And there are lots of different parasites that you could be dealing with. You may have come across, probably be careful looking up parasites on TikTok or Instagram, A, because of what you'll see, but B, because there are going to be so many people convincing you that you need to do a parasite cleanse, which is absolutely not the case. So there are lots of different parasites. Many of them we don't actually even need to get rid of. And it's really only if the parasites that you do have are causing problems for you and you know that you have them, that it's something that you would actually want to address. Um, that's why I like, with more, chronic conditions, if you have the gut symptoms, if you have, kind of sleeping issues, anxiety, jaw clenching and grinding and things like that, and the basics aren't sort of working for you. Also, chronic low iron is another one to consider. If you have a lot of these things going on and you're not seeing shifts with the foundational pieces, 70-80% of people are going to see shifts with those foundational pieces. It's a small number of people that are going to need to dig deeper into that. That's when testing is helpful. Like I said, if you go online, there's going to be a bunch of people that just want to sell you a parasite cleanse, which is hardcore, extreme, definitely not something you want to do unless you actually need to. And I would only be doing that if you've tested, confirmed that it's something you actually need to address, because there could be many other reasons, like a lot of the things that we've spoken about, which are often going to be a lot easier, and cheaper to address. So definitely a factor, that some people deal with, if you've done, I've had a bunch of these things over the years, traveling to Peru and India and things like that. And if you've done a lot of that sort of travel, even if you haven't, you can pick it up from, lots of different contaminated food and things like that. But I still don't think it's, a thing that everyone's dealing with. But that's when, dealing with something chronic long term, the basics aren't seeing the shift for you. That's when, testing, getting that information, and then you can address that in a targeted way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Um, One question we had is, what is the connection between, emotions, trauma, the nervous system, and gut health? I know that suppressed emotions can really affect, our gut, stress, all of that. Can you speak to that piece?
Yeah, definitely. This is another one of those, two-way connections. So we have the gut-brain axis. So our gut and our brain are very much connected and they can influence each other. So when we have an imbalanced gut microbiome, that can influence our mental health. And there's plenty of research out now about, that sort of connection, and studies also that show, improving the health of the gut microbiome, like through just diet and simple things, can, basically, in some cases, even, get rid of depression, but significantly, reduce and help manage depression, anxiety, and things like that. So, we know there's that huge connection. For some people, it's just going to be one piece of the puzzle, but it's for everyone, it's absolutely worth looking into, the diet and gut health, and how you can support and address those things. So we know that the gut can influence our moods and mental health, but it also works in the reverse as well. So when we're stressed, our digestion is effectively, suppressed, or it's not quite shut down. It's still doing what it can because you're shoveling food in there in most cases, and it's like got to figure out what it can do. But when you're under stress, our body is really focused on our vital functions, heart, lungs, just keeping you basically alive. And it's that sort of analogy of activating you to run away from the tiger. If you are just chronically stressed, even from work deadlines, or if it's from, trauma and things like that, even if it was something that was, from many years ago and hasn't been, I suppose, not always resolved, but it's something that's still, within you and impacting you day to day, that is going to be sort of driving that chronically, activated or stressed out state. And our body, or, our, I guess, body and brain, it's not perceiving the difference between different types of stress. It's going to think you're constantly running away from the tiger, whether it's, some trauma that you experienced 10 to 20 years ago, or it's a deadline at work, or whatever it is. It's going to have, the same effect on the body, although to different extents. And that can be a bit of a vicious cycle because that suppresses our digestion. We're not producing those, enzymes, stomach acid to that same level. We can't break down our food adequately. That's going to lead to symptoms that's going to impact our gut motility. So you might get constipation, you might get diarrhea. You're then also going to, likely not be absorbing the nutrients from our food adequately. So then you can get, nutritional deficiencies, low iron, things like that, which can further just drive this whole vicious cycle. And then it's the vicious cycle. The gut continues to influence, your nervous system and vice versa as well. So that's kind of a lot, but they're all very much connected. And this is why in every sort of protocol or list of recommendations, like 99% of the time, I include, just getting outside for a walk, movement, things like that. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. And also finding stress management practices or stress reduction practices that work for you and you can incorporate into your daily life. Again, it doesn't have to be sitting down for 40 minutes of meditation again. It can be journaling. It can be just mindfully having your coffee by yourself without the podcasts and radio and distractions, simple things like that that help just, bring you down a little. And of course, if you need to get support around that, if it's a therapist or, something like that to help you sort of take that sort of root cause approach when it comes to the stress and emotional side of things, then that's extremely important too. And it's going to be an essential piece of the puzzle to getting you to a good place with your gut health and overall health.
Yeah, it's amazing what just stress and being in that kind of survival state can really do for your gut health. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's something we often don't think about. We want to, harp on the foods and the supplements, and it's like, oh my gosh, the stress piece and the nervous system piece and like feeling safe in your body. All of those things are so important. Yeah.
Definitely.
What else do we have? So why is it sometimes hard to choose healthy foods or stick to healthy diets, would you say?
Mm. So I think personally, I think the number one reason is because what people think of as healthy food is really boring and gross. Like plain lettuce and like broiled chicken breast, for example. I think when we think, okay, I'm going to meal prep, or like plain broccoli and, broiled chicken breast, cut it up, chuck it in some containers and eat it for the next 5 days. That's an extreme example. I've definitely done that, probably about 15 years ago. And that almost, as someone that really likes food, that's like a little bit soul destroying. And I know that's something I would not be able to stick with. And I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And, that's just so common. And I think it's a great time to be, focusing on eating healthy because there's amazing condiments that actually have really good ingredients. There are so many good recipes that you can, I said I love lasagna. There's even like amazing lasagna that's just basically meat and vegetables that tastes like pretty much just as good as a real thing that you could eat, lunch and dinner every day. So I think it's making it interesting, especially if you're someone that really loves food. I know some people are very functional about food and it just doesn't matter for them so much. If that's you, then that's amazing because meal prep and everything is going to be so easy for you. But if you love food like me, go get some of your favorite condiments, like get yourself a great mayo if you like that has good ingredients in it. Um, you know, like ketchup, whatever it is you like, you can find really good options of these things. Find, think about what your favorite foods are and how can you make a, like healthier version of that. How can you, it's often just swaps instead of, fundamental like changes. So if you are having like spaghetti bolognese, for example, instead of, regular pasta, which, if you do fine with that, nothing wrong with that. Maybe look at how you can add a few extra veggies into the sauce. You might have like grated carrot, grated zucchini, things like that. And then maybe you get like a pulse pasta, legume pasta, which is going to bump up that protein and fiber and be a little bit, lower in carbohydrates as well. And also, gluten free for those people that will benefit from that. So there's often just swaps that don't really take that much more time or effort that are going to make your food, still taste really good. So you're not just having boring salads. I think the other thing is, I mean, there are a bunch of different factors, time, budget, also just wrapping your head around what to actually eat in the beginning. But I think there's a huge mindset thing that we think it's really that all or nothing approach, and we think it has to be perfect. But if we take that approach, we're never going to get anywhere. So you've just got to start with where you're at. And I find, for a lot of people, it's like a big breakfast experiment is a great way to start. Like, how can you bump up that protein with breakfast? If you're just having cereal, maybe you even, chuck a couple of boiled eggs on the side, for example. You're not even fundamentally changing what you're doing, you're just adding to that. So I think, that's a great way to go. But, there's lots of reasons. So I think finding out the reasons for you and finding out just simple ways. We know with habits, gradual changes over time is what sticks. So take the pressure off yourself to get it all perfect straight away and just slowly build on those habits over time.
Love that. Thank you so much. We just had a question come in. What is the healthiest gluten alternative flour?
There are so many, and I think it just depends what you're looking for and what you're, cooking and also what you tolerate. So it really comes down to the individual. Like an almond meal or almond flour is something that I find handy to have for lots of different things. It's also, buckwheat, tapioca or arrowroot. All great options. It kind of depends, do you need something lower carb? Do you need something that's, nut free? Whatever it is. There's lots of great options. And all of them are sort of healthy in different ways. It really just depends on your needs essentially.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We have a few minutes left. Feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you want, just come on and talk to us. Talk to us. We're here. I know a few people are hopping off because it's almost that time, but we have Fran here. She is an expert, and if there's anything you want to ask, please go ahead. Now is the time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Oh, what is your podcast? Rachel's asking.
It's called High Vibe and Healthy, but if you just Google my name and podcast, it should come up.
Fran Dargaville podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, I have lots of resources and things online. I think the podcast is a really good place to start because you can have a look through. Okay, I've got bloating, I've got low iron. You can look at the different sort of podcast episodes, and they're all sort of bite-sized ways to get little micro lessons around whatever it is that you're looking for support with.
I just popped your website, your Instagram, and your podcast in the chat.
Perfect. So efficient.
Yes, got it all ready to go. And anyone catching the replay, I will post that as well so that we can follow you there. Carl is asking, do you have a book or materials we can look at for more info?
No, I don't have a book. That would definitely be on the radar at some point. That's going to be many years away, I'm guessing. But yeah, any of those resources, podcast, Instagram, lots more information for you on there.
Wonderful. Thank you. We had a question about what do you suggest to do for my 6-year-old son who has prolonged constipation. He goes once in 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think starting point, it's getting things moving. And I think there are very like gentle ways that you can do that. And definitely with anyone, but a 6-year-old, also the chronic side of things, I would be getting support around that from, functional nutritionists, naturopath, or, someone that is takes a holistic approach. So things like, magnesium citrate, the PHGG, not right for everyone, but that's why it's good to get one-on-one support for this kind of thing. But also looking at hydration, water intake, that side of things is very important. And then beyond that, there's lots of different things that can be driving chronic constipation. It can be like thyroid issues, structural abnormalities that are sort of driving that. Also things like, gluten sensitivity, celiac disease, things like that, that you want to sort of thoroughly investigate to figure out what's driving that. So it's sort of, short term, maybe it's things like the water intake, that's going to be important, long term as well. Magnesium citrate, things like that to get things moving. Abdominal, massage as well is a really, really good one too. You can look up videos on YouTube how to do that. That can be, very comforting and heat packs on the belly and things like that. But longer term, investigating those root causes, because, I think so often we'll go to the doctor and we're told, yeah, that's pretty normal, something you'll probably just have to put up with, but it may be some sort of thyroid issue, structural abnormality, things like that, that may be able to, in a lot of cases, they're going to be able to be addressed. So definitely want to look at that, underlying cause as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. I hope that was helpful. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions for Fran? Fran, this was wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. So many amazing questions as well. It was great.
Yeah, it was so great. And we love your accent.
Well, I love all of your accents as well. So,
Oh, we have accents. Yes, they're not as
yeah. I love
good.
it.
Rachel's laughing. Well, thank you. Anyone else have any final questions before we hop off? Well, we will be sure to follow along and follow you on Instagram and all the places. Check out your podcast. And anyone watching the replay, we will go ahead and post this along with those resources. So thank you, Fran, for everything. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really great chatting with you all.
Of course. I'm going to stop.